Welcome one and all to my very first theory video to focus on something other than Steven Universe, and I'm sure that many of you are surprised exactly what the topic of this theory is. I know a lot of you were hoping for a theory on another cartoon, but right now Steven Universe is probably the only cartoon I watch that I feel really needs theorizing about. Obviously I'm not watching the right cartoons if that's the case, but the point still stands, and I am all for shameless tie-ins to my gaming channel, so we're doing a Bethesda Games theory today. And now the bare bones of this theory has been done many times. In fact, ever since Bethesda Softworks acquired the Fallout franchise and released the hit game Fallout 3, people have been questioning whether or not it was possible that Bethesda's two huge properties, Fallout and The Elder Scrolls, could exist in the same universe. And of course, the resounding answer has been no, with a lot of theorists just dismissing the possibility due to the fact that Fallout was a property originally created by a different company, and therefore it could not have been the intention. But to that I say, who cares? Bethesda owns Fallout now. If they want to retcon it into the Elder Scrolls universe, that's their prerogative. And I want to point out first and foremost that this is mostly a joke theory. Even people who spread it around don't really believe it. All I'm trying to say here is that it doesn't necessarily have to be dismissed so out of hand, that it is still possible for this theory to be true. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Fallout or the Elder Scrolls, or are familiar with one but not the other, or who are familiar with one or the other but don't know this theory, I'm going to go over briefly why this theory has seen a resurgence in popularity very recently. With the release of the most recent Bethesda game, Fallout 4, players were treated to the chance to encounter this strange plant on the airship for the Brotherhood of Steel, one of the factions within the game. And while it is not visually identical and therefore not a straight up resource swap, it is very visually similar to a plant that is very familiar to many Skyrim fans, a plant called Nirnroot. And I use Skyrim as the specific example here because with each Elder Scrolls game, the visuals are updated and the items within the universe, including the plant life, are retconned to have a different shape. And Skyrim is the most recent single-player Elder Scrolls game to have Nirnroot in it, and therefore has the most updated look. You can see that these plants look very similar. They're both bioluminescent and have a similar leaf and root structure. The primary difference being that the experimental plant from Fallout 4 is a bit more colorful next to Nirnroot's bright green, and Nirnroot makes a noise, a sort of ringing sound whenever you approach it. The experimental plant does not. But for this theory to work, the Elder Scrolls games are set in the far distant future of the Fallout universe. So the plant will have evolved and changed over time, as it has adapted to the changing environments. What this theory specifically states is that the Fallout games' version of Earth eventually developed into the main planet of the Elder Scrolls universe called Nirn. That the continents drifted into the shape of the continents of Nirn, and humanity evolved into the various races that we see in the Elder Scrolls universe. And that the experimental plant is the link that proves this. That the experimental plant was eventually planted throughout the entire world, and as I mentioned before, evolved and changed with the environment to become Nirnroot. But there are three primary holes in this theory. The first being that the experimental plant heals you, whereas Nirnroot actually damages your health. But that's not actually evidence against this theory. All food in Fallout 4 heals you. That's just what it does. It's the mechanic. And even though Nirnroot does have the damage health effect, even though it does damage that specific value, it's not like it's actually harmful to a person's overall health, since we do know from Skyrim that Nirnroot is used as an ingredient in some recipes, so both plants can sustain a person. And we do know that the experimental plant has negative side effects, as the members of the Brotherhood of Steel who were investigating and experimenting on the plant did manage to brew it into a tea which became addictive to the point that they started harming themselves and others. Both plants can be used to sustain a person but have negative side effects. Bioluminescent, similar structure, and negative side effects to their consumption. They definitely seem like similar plants. Therefore, this particular piece of evidence against the theory is debunked. So what about the second? The fact that Elder Scrolls has magic and its own mythology, which seems to contradict with the idea of the history of the Elder Scrolls universe being the Fallout universe. Well, you have to understand that mythology is just that, mythology. Just because we interact with some of the gods of the Elder Scrolls universe throughout the games doesn't mean that everything in their mythology is true. For example, the sun and stars in the Elder Scrolls universe are said to be holes between the mortal plane and the plane of magic known as Aetherius, and that it's through these holes that magic leaks into our realm. And yet the sun and stars of the Elder Scrolls universe behave like a sun and stars. There's no reason to take this myth literally, as it doesn't seem to be true. It just sounds like a holdover from a time when people didn't understand the science of what they were looking at. Or how about this one? The myth that the two moons of Nirn are actually pieces of the carcass of a dead god. Well, once again, visually speaking, they're obviously moons. They're obviously big space rocks with chunks blasted out of them by asteroid impacts, just like our moon. Maybe one of the gods of the Elder Scrolls universe did die and get his carcass split into two pieces, but that doesn't mean he became the moons. That just doesn't make sense. Again, it sounds like one of those holdover myths that we have in the real world from a time when people didn't understand the science behind things. Which leaves us with the idea of magic, that magic exists in Elder Scrolls, but Fallout, being an exaggerated, over-the-top parallel to our own world, doesn't. That magic just isn't part of the Fallout universe. Well, quite frankly, it is. I'm going to be speaking primarily of examples from Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, since those are the games I have the most experience with, and they're the ones which tie directly into Bethesda as a brand. But in those two games, we see multiple examples of paranormal events which are definitely real and definitely did happen. They're mostly references to the Cthulhu mythology, but they do prove that there is a supernatural element to the Fallout universe, and there is a Cthulhu-esque creature in the mythology of the Elder Scrolls as well. His name is Hermaeus Mora, and he was a major character in the final Skyrim DLC, Dragonborn. So the idea that the mythology and the magic contradict to the point that the two universes couldn't be the same is also debunked. It doesn't prove that they are the same universe, but it definitely proves that they don't have to be mutually exclusive universes either. Which brings us to the final point of contention that this theory has faced. The idea that Nirn cannot be Earth because it has two moons. And quite frankly, you can't just add another moon to the orbit of a planet and have the same species continue to evolve on that planet the same way that they have been. It's just not possible. It would change the ecosystem too much. Now, granted, the humans in the Fallout universe are clearly a bit more adaptive and resilient than the humans in the real world would be, since humanity has been able to survive a nuclear war and thrive in the subsequent radioactive environment. But at the end of the day, I actually agree with the assessment that because of the extra moon, Nirn cannot be a future Earth. It's just not possible. Or if it is, it's very unlikely and quite a stretch. But to that I say, this theory was never meant to prove that Nirn is a future Earth specifically, just that the universe of the Elder Scrolls games is, or possibly is, the future of the Fallout universe. And I ask this question of you: why does it have to be the same planet? I mentioned the Brotherhood of Steel earlier on in this video as the faction that discovered and experimented on the experimental plant. For those of you who don't know, the Brotherhood of Steel is a faction within the Fallout lore that hoards, uses, and abuses technology because they believe that it was technology in the hands of people who weren't fit to use it, which caused the near extinction event that was the Great War. The Brotherhood of Steel is very selfish, shown to have absolutely no qualms with experimenting on beings that they see as subhuman. They also build giant airships and make war with anyone who they see as a threat. Now imagine that the Brotherhood of Steel came to believe in the supernatural elements of their world as well, and attempted to harness them through technology. Imagine that they got quite good at this, maybe even using combinations of magic and technology to animate technological soldiers to bolster their numbers. Since they don't believe in sharing their technology with others, they build huge cities that are either hidden away underground or sequestered away in difficult to find locations, and are practically impossible to enter by anyone who doesn't understand how. Anyone who knows the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe might suddenly find that this depiction of the Brotherhood of Steel reminds them of someone: the Dwemer, an extinct race of elves in the Elder Scrolls lore who are almost exactly as I have described. They built airships in the past. They build sprawling cities underneath mountains and underneath entire provinces that are practically impossible for anyone to enter other than themselves. They hoard, use, and abuse technology, constantly developing it further and further, harness magical elements, build giant robots, and experiment on any creatures unlike themselves. Both the Giants of Skyrim and the Falmer, also featured in Skyrim as an enemy but mentioned throughout Elder Scrolls lore, exist in the form that they do today because of intervention from the Dwemer, because of experimentation by the Dwemer. Imagine that at some point the Brotherhood of Steel graduated beyond building airships and started building spaceships. They took their vast technological knowledge and escaped the radioactive wastes of Earth for another planet somewhere else in the universe. There they encountered entirely other humanoid species, and eventually their interactions and interbreeding with members of those species led to the creation of the races we know as the inhabitants of Nirn today. But that at some point, some huge cataclysm caused most of their knowledge to be lost, caused most of everyone's knowledge and history to be lost, and that world had to start over as well. But enough of that mentality survived for the Dwemer to adopt the same mentality as the Brotherhood of Steel and begin performing some of the same kinds of actions. seeing everyone who wasn't one of them as a potential enemy, and acting selfishly to preserve what they thought was the greater good. History progressed normally, and eventually we ended up with the Nirn that we know today in the lore of the Elder Scrolls games. And this idea isn't too far-fetched. In multiple Fallout games, there have been instances of encounters with alien beings that have intergalactic travel capabilities. That means that even if the Brotherhood isn't able to develop that technology for themselves, it's possible that they could reverse engineer it from alien crafts. And the existence of aliens in this shared universe helps explain what the Aedra and Daedra of Elder Scrolls lore might be. They could be aliens of some kind, that either share a deeper connection with the supernatural forces of that universe, or have some kind of technology that allows them to appear that way. In this version of the theory, Nirn is not Earth. It is another planet colonized by some of the survivors of Earth at some distant point in the future. And Earth might still be out there, somewhere else in the Elder Scrolls universe. Maybe society started over. Maybe humanity went extinct. There's no way of knowing. And of course, this theory is still kind of a joke theory. I don't believe that this is ever going to turn out to be true, but I don't think it's ever going to be outright confirmed false by the games either, so it's still fun to speculate. And it is certainly possible. No pun this time, guys. In all honesty, what did you think of this video? The first theory I have ever made that wasn't about Steven Universe. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.